So for each of the core habits, we've come up with 3 different levels so that everybody has a place to start or a place to go next, depending on where you're at. And we've done that with prayer as well. We have a starter habit, a standard habit, and a stretch habit with room to create a specialized habit as well. And each of these habits builds on the previous habit of prayer. And so as we walk through them, decide which one is best for you in this season of your life. Here's the starter habit. Pray the Lord's Prayer at least once every weekday. That's it. Pray the Lord's Prayer at least once every weekday. Again, when you're starting a new habit, you want to scale it down until it's as simple as possible, even if it feels too easy. Again, the James Clear has the 2-minute rule. They try to get it down to 2 minutes or less. And one of the easiest ways to pray is to simply pray the Lord's Prayer. And there's 2 reasons why this is a really good place to start. One is it will take you less than 30 seconds to get through it. To prove it, I'm going to say it right now, and you can time me and see how long it takes. Our Father in heaven, your name be honored as holy. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. And do not bring us into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. I even slowed down at the end there. It did not take very long. The other thing is, you don't even need to think of words with this. They're already written down for you. Jesus says, just pray these words if you're not sure what to pray. You don't have to come up with anything. The words are already there. And so you don't even have to think about it. It literally could not be any easier. And this has been the place to start since the earliest days of the church. There's a really early document outside of the New Testament called the Didache, outlining what people should do to grow in their faith. And at one point, they encouraged new believers to pray the Lord's Prayer thrice daily. I think we need to bring back the word thrice, but 3 times a day. It could be when you wake up or on your morning commute. It could be over lunch or dinner, or maybe on your evening commute on your way home, and then maybe before bed. And you could just get out your device and you could set a reminder right now to remind you when to pray. And so, again, praying the Lord's Prayer kind of like once a day, kind of like reading a chapter of the Bible a day, isn't going to lead to an exciting prayer life. It's not going to be riveting for you. But that's okay, because the point of praying the Lord's Prayer at least once a day is about getting into the habit of prayer. It's about just calling up God. It's about remembering that He's there and wants to talk to you. It's about getting the structure of prayer into your bones before you go deeper with it. And here's the bonus, is that if you do this every day for a few weeks, just praying the Lord's Prayer every day, a few times a day, you're going to end up having it memorized without even trying. When my son Levi was just 3 years old, we were saying the Lord's Prayer at dinner every night for about a month, as just a habit for our family. And even at 3, he had the Lord's Prayer memorized after a month of saying it. And if you do memorize it, you're going to already have 5 of the 12 verses that we recommend memorizing as part of the stretch habit for engaging with the Bible. So that's a bonus as well. The second is a standard habit. And this is to pray for at least 10 minutes every weekday. Pray for at least 10 minutes every weekday. Once you have the Lord's Prayer in your heart and have a rhythm of saying it regularly, you're ready to begin to expand on it a little bit more. And 10 minutes every weekday is a pretty good place to start. And I suggest setting a timer when you get started, putting limits on your prayer life. I know that might sound counterintuitive, but putting limits on it so that you don't overdo it the first time and you're like, prayer sounds exhausting now. And so when the timer goes off, you can keep going and keep praying if you want to, but you're also free to stop for the day. Again, sometimes we can overdo it. And so it can be just fine just to stop right there. And so here's 5 tips for getting into that habit of prayer. The first one is just to make time for it. Unlike the starter habit, where you can probably just find little cracks in time all throughout the day that you can use to pray the Lord's Prayer, you're going to have to make time to spend 10 minutes in prayer every day. Maybe it's at the beginning of the end of your day. Maybe it is on your commute that takes about 10 minutes and you're like, that's when I'm going to pray. Or in the shower, or right after you drop the kids off for school. Whatever it takes, find those 10 minutes, make time every single day. For me, I try to do this before my kids get up, but if I don't have time or if I sleep in that day a little bit, my walk to work takes me about 15 minutes, and I can use that time often to pray as well. Find a time that routinely works for you and try to stick to it. Another thing is to turn off your devices. You might be using your phone as a timer, but at least try to put it to do not disturb for 10 minutes or something like that, and put it in a different room. I can't tell you how many times I've started praying and then before long I was reading the news or checking my email or on social media and I've completely forgotten about prayer. Another tip is to use a framework. Instead of just trying to do freestyle prayer and just come up with things to talk about for 10 minutes with God, use the framework that we just introduced to get you started. Otherwise, it's kind of hard to fill 10 minutes. And there's a lot of other frameworks out there, but the one I recommend is using those 5 questions that we just talked about to kickstart those 10 minutes of prayer. And you can spend maybe 2 minutes on each question, and that will get you all the way through 10 minutes. Or maybe you spend a long time just on one question today that really takes you deeper into prayer. The next tip is to keep a list. Sometimes it's hard to remember what to pray for, and if you keep a list, you'll have endless things to keep praying for, and you'll be able to see how God answers those prayers over time. And so maybe if you're tech savvy, there's a lot of apps out there that can help keep a list for you. But again, I'm pretty analog, and so I just keep a page in the back of the same journal I use to reflect on the Bible that I open up to when I'm praying, and while I'm praying, I go through that list. And then finally, another tip is to leave space for silence. Prayer actually is not meant to just be a 10-minute monologue to God. It's meant to be a back and forth conversation, a dialogue where you hear from God as well. And so you got to leave space, though, in your prayer to actually hear from Him. And so when you're getting started in this habit, limits are pretty good. But once you get this established as a habit, don't be afraid to pray a little bit longer. There's something that creatives call flow. And what that means is you get into this space where creativity just starts flowing out of you, and you don't even have to think about it anymore, and it's hard to leave once you're there. The same thing can happen with prayer. It takes a little bit to get there, but once you get to this state in prayer, you don't want to leave. You just know that you're sitting in the presence of God and you're talking with Him. And once you're there, you don't want to leave, and it takes a little bit to get there. So start with limits, but then as you get it started as a habit, don't be afraid to expand. And then finally, the stretch habit. And the stretch habit is fast for at least one day every month, in addition to praying for at least 10 minutes every weekday. Fasting, in the biblical sense of the word, is really nothing more than intensified prayer. It's intensified prayer. It's going without food for a period of time in order to focus on prayer. And it might be one of the most overlooked habits in the church today. It's interesting that Jesus' comments on prayer in the Sermon on the Mount come right after his comments on generosity, which is another core habit, and right before his comments on fasting. That's why in Matthew chapter 6, verses 6 through 18, he says, whenever you fast. He doesn't say, hey, if you ever feel like fasting, by the way. He says, whenever you fast, not if you fast. He's assuming that we're going to fast. And what you see in the book of Acts, you see the church fasted. In the Didache, which I referenced earlier, new believers were encouraged to fast as well as pray. John Wesley encouraged the Methodists to fast on Wednesdays and Fridays from evening to evening. It's common throughout the history of the church. It's making a comeback right now as a dietary strategy, but I want it to make a comeback as a prayer strategy as well. And so when you're starting with fasting, try to pick the same day every month from sundown to sundown. Maybe it's the first Friday of the month or the last Friday, and try to pick a day where it's okay if you're a little bit hangry. Because usually when you're fasting and you're not eating and you're still getting used to fasting, you're a little bit grumpy throughout the day. So don't choose a day to fast that you know you have 6 back-to-back meetings, because you are not going to be a great person to be around. And so pick a day that's a regular day every month, put it as an automatic repeater on your calendar so that it's on a day when you know it's okay that you're not going to be around a lot of people. And then on that day, make some extra time for prayer, because again, it's meant to be intensified prayer. So on fast days, make extra time for prayer. You could use it maybe to reflect on your month with God. I know some people who take one day a month and they take that day to fast and they just say, God, let me see what you've been doing in my life this month, and then prepare for the next month. And so there's a lot of things that you could fast from, but my recommendation is that you fast if you're physically able. Not everybody is, but if you are, to fast from actual food for that day. There's something about abstaining from food that intensifies prayer like nothing else can. And that's what we saw in the life of Jesus as well. So those are 3 levels of a habit of prayer. And it's worth mentioning that the habit of prayer stacks really well with the habit of engaging the Bible. James Clear talks about this concept of habit stacking in Atomic Habits. And he calls it habit stacking is pairing a habit that you want to start with a habit that you're already doing. And so in this case, a habit stack might look something like this. So maybe you already make coffee every morning. That's just a habit for you. And so you say, after I start making coffee in the morning, I'm going to read one chapter of the Bible while it's brewing, because it probably takes about 3 to 5 minutes to brew. And that's about how long it'll take you to read the Bible. And then after I finish reading the Bible, I'm going to grab my cup of coffee, I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes, and I'm going to spend some time in prayer. The whole stack is going to take you about 15 minutes to complete. So at the beginning of this unit, I mentioned Frank Laubach, who had plenty of reasons not to pray. But at some point, he decided to go all in on a life of prayer. The year is 1930, and he decided to try an experiment to see what would happen if he started a habit of bringing God to mind every minute of every day. It's the ultimate stretch habit. He called it his game with minutes. And what he was trying to do is just be aware of God as many minutes of the day as possible. And he kept a journal of the experience. He started to record what happened. And eventually it became a book called Letters by a Modern Mystic. And if you've ever read it, what you see is that he had lots of days where prayer did not go well, where he forgot to pray, where he forgot about God for long periods of time. And then he had days where it went really well, and again, days where it went terribly. But what happened is that the experience completely changed the course of his life. At first, it was challenging, but eventually it became natural and automatic for him to begin to pray and reach out to God. And despite his early setbacks in life, what he found is that the rest of his life became unbelievably productive. He developed a system for teaching literacy that influenced millions of people. He traveled to 103 countries and developed literacy primers in 312 languages, eventually becoming the only American missionary to be featured on a stamp, among other things. And he pointed it all back to that experiment he started in 1930, where he began to say, I'm going to start to pray as often as I can. At one point, he summarizes his experimental habit this way: my part is to live this hour in continuous inner conversation with God and in perfect responsiveness to his will, to make this hour gloriously rich. He wrote that on January 29th, 1930. That's really the goal for us. The goal is not just to say the Lord's Prayer thrice daily, or to pray for 10 minutes for an hour a day, or even fast one day every month. The goal is that, as 1 Thessalonians 5:17 says, to pray constantly, or to pray without ceasing. And as a result, step further into the life you're made for and begin to see what God does with our life as we begin a habit of prayer.